Well, for those of you who didn't stick around, Class 8 started out as kind of a mess, with the web being down and me having to go back home for the lecture notes. But we persevered, had a pinup of assignment 1, and then an abbreviated version of the general topic I was intending to cover, combining things in AutoCAD, followed by a discussion of the objects for assignment 2 and some methods for measuring them. First of all, I was truly impressed with everyone's work on the apartment assignment. For what are essentially your very first CAD drawings, these are just great. And my hat is off to Becky and all the hand drafting you guys did for her last year. It shows. In class on Monday, we pinned up both the measured sketches and the resulting CAD drawings in the interest of seeing what we can learn from each other's ways of doing things. Please don't take my comments in what follows as negative criticism, but as positive suggestions to make the whole measuring, sketching, drafting process even more useful, since you will probably be doing a lot of it in the years to come. To start on a positive note, Kitty took the time to label her sketch, which I should have made part of the assignment to be part of your standard operating procedure. In all the professional offices I have worked in, everything to do with a project is kept in a project binder from day one through completion. And other members of a design team might be consulting your sketches weeks or months later, so it's always good to have your name on them in case people have questions later on, as well as the date, since things might change over the course of a project. As people preparing for a profession, we need what we do to be accurate. You don't want the nurse preparing your injection to mutter, "Oh heck, that's close enough." I had asked for dimensional accuracy to the nearest quarter inch, but noted a number of sketches that rounded everything off to the nearest full inch. I can safely say rounded off because I know that not everything in these rooms is built to an integer number of inches. When I see that someone has taken the time to deal with quarter inches, I have more confidence in the whole drawing. Sometimes the fractions really do matter. I'd also ask you to be sure to measure the overall length and width of each room, north to south, east to west, because adding up a lot of individual measurements can introduce a cumulative rounding error. Before I got my laser rangefinder, I'd hook the end of a tape measure under a light switch cover or behind a baseboard or the like to be able to stretch a tape across a room in one go. Let me approach the delicate topic of tidiness with regards to architectural documentation. We aren't doing life drawing sketches here, where multiple lines might be used to suggest a particular type of contour. These are measured drawings of a built environment, and each line you make represents not only a thing, but a decision about that thing. This is here. To use this sketch again, what and where things are is very clear. By contrast, several of the sketch drawings took a more painterly approach, whose main problem, I think, is that all the extra lines end up obscuring detail, where detail is what we are trying to provide. I suggest we heed a general rule proposed by the graphic designer and educator Edward Tufte. Try to present the most information with the least amount of ink. The flip side of providing more lines than needed is not providing enough information, especially about the thickness of walls in these sketches. An important consideration because things happen inside walls that we need to be aware of, like ducts and chimneys and plumbing stacks. Not including both sides of a wall also makes it hard to tell which side a given dimension applies to. There are a number of different ways to combine things in AutoCAD. We're making blocks, which is like a bunch of discrete lines and stuff that are all lumped together and move as one piece. But there are a couple of other ways to do that that might be more, that have different uses and will be more useful. And we looked a little bit at polylines. A little bit more I want to show you, because they have some capabilities that your regular line types do not have, which is they can vary in width. So let's review just what a polyline is. We'll go to polyline, and it can either be a series of straight lines, and then that's one thing. And since we were talking about fillet earlier, you can fillet a whole polyline at one time if you want. So if you pick the fillet command, and one of the fillet command's options is polyline, and our radius is set for 1, then we just pick that, and let's set the trim mode off, fillet, T for trim, T for do trim it, then P for polyline. Isn't this fun? And then, isn't this an object? I'll get it. Fillet. Mode is trim, radius is 1, P for polyline, select a 2D polyline, and there it is. Okay. So, you know, if you've roughed out a rectangular swimming pool and you want to round them all off by 4 feet or something, actually, let's just do that because that's something else nice about polylines. PL is the same for polyline. Polylines also, when you're drawing them and you get sort of near the end, you don't actually have to bring this up. You can snap to that, or you can just type C for close and it closes itself, you know, finishes that up. So fillet, let's set the radius to 3 feet. Set the polyline option and then pick it. So it does them all at 3 feet. Now imagine this was your pool and you need to do, you've got that tile that's 8 inches all the way around it. You can offset a whole polyline at once and set up piece by piece by piece by piece. So if I go to offset distance, that's what it's asking for right here. We'll say a foot. And then you get to choose whether it's to the inside or to the outside, and I'll say to the outside. So instead of having to go pick and new fillets and new radiuses and all that kind of stuff, you just do that all at one time. So another cool thing about polylines, lines on the screen, just lines, are just always going to be this skinny thing. No matter how much you zoom in on them, they're just always the same thickness. Polylines, and this gets into more of a graphic design sort of a deal. Each line or arc segment of a polyline can have its own width as well. We'll make this one have a uniform width of 12 inches. And that'll plot that width, and it's good for title block edges and that kind of stuff that you don't want to have to set up a whole new layer with a width for it. It's just going to plot that way. Polyline segments can also vary in width as they go. So polyline, I'll make my width be, let's make it wider, let's make it be 20 to start with, and 5 to end with. So now I get something like that going on. And if you combine this with like straight line segments and curved line segments, you could do PL. Let's do width. I'm going to make the width be 24 and the ending width be 12. And I'm going to draw an arc with that, A for arc. 24 to 12. And then the next little piece of arc, I'm going to make its width start at 12 and end at 0. So we get a little guy like that going on. So there's options there that you can do with one object that otherwise you might have to draw some perimeters and then apply a hatch to the inside. So polylines, a couple of ways here to create polylines that I've listed. I'm going to skip most of those, except for some reason you would like to keep all these guys, but also have the polyline that shows that interior space. That's the boundary or bpoly command. BO is the shortcut. Okay. And sometimes it's hard to pick something you've just created. You know, if I'm going over here, it might be picking one of these circles instead. But if you remember from when we were talking about selecting things, you can always select the most recently created thing, the last thing made, by typing L for last when it asks you to select something. So you can do, so I want to do move, and then L for last, enter. I'm done with those. And then that comes all by itself without having to trim those down or anything like that. The next way to combine things together, sort of usually on a temporary basis, is called groups. And let's say I wanted these 3 things right here always just move around together. It's just a design element I want to have. It's not anything I want to save to put in another drawing or something, we can either select them ahead of time and then do home group over here. I'm not sure where it is on the Mac, but the command is group. And now these guys travel as one. They copy as one. Unlike blocks, which when you modify one version of one, they all update, which is very handy. Groups are made so that you can move things around inside them. If these were chairs around a table and you wanted to vary them a little bit, over here in group, we can, right now, if I pick this group, the whole thing moves. If we turn that off, group selection on or off, so that if we make it so it's not highlighted, then we can move an individual object around. And then if we turn group selection back on, then they can move together again. So it's a slightly different way to address dealing with multiple things that you don't want to have to, if there might be 40 of them, that you don't want to have to pick them at each time. You just make them a group and move them all at once. The basic process for creating blocks is just not that big a deal. Here's what we do. I'm going to make some simple shape. And I'm going to call this a planter or something like that. And these are objects that I've drawn. I'm going to put them all on layer 0. And we'll get to that later on, but it's that's good operating procedures to put anything that you want on a block in layer 0 before you can turn it into a block. But what we're going to do is going to take these 3 objects, store them as one with a name, so we can recall it by name when we're putting it into our drawing. We can save it out as a separate drawing file and insert it into other CAD drawings. It could be an airplane, it could be an atom, doesn't matter how big it is. So a couple of things that we're going to be asked, decisions that we want to make about that, we need to provide. We need to give it a name, which I'm going to call planter. We need to give what's called its insertion point, which is, as we're moving this around, dragging around the screen to place it, do we want the cursor to be here? That's one insertion point. It could be here. Which would you like? It could be here. What makes sense? The important thing is that it's not arbitrary and it's not off in space somewhere. Let's pick the center of the circle, assuming that they're all lined up. So to create a block, you type the word block. It's the easiest way. And the first thing, we've got to give it a name. Blocks are named things. When we save it out to a drawing, if we call this planter, we'll have a new file called planter.dwg. Planter. And then it'll say select the objects, if you haven't already. I'll just put my box around those. And I could be picking other stuff, but I have to hit enter to let AutoCAD know that I'm done with that. And then I'm going to pick the point that I want our insertion point to be. It's called the base point of the block. And I'll snap to the center of that circle. I've got my center snaps turned on. So there's my center. And I think that's all we really need to do. Oh, and one little last question is, do I want to take these guys right here, the ones that are drawn on the screen, and convert them into a block while I'm doing it? And I'll say yes, and we say okay. So there this is. It's a block reference, and its name is planter down here. So we can put those in an array or copy them or something like that. Well, a lot of times with something that's going to be a standard element, you start out with a fairly simple version of it, and then as the drawing refines, you maybe do it in more detail. Maybe you add text, maybe you add some more line work. So this is over on page 3. A couple of ways to redefine a block. Where do I get to that? Editing blocks. Actually, this is on page 4. And the easiest way to do it is to select one of them, right-click, and go to Block Editor. And this is its own little mini editor where we won't see the other stuff. And there it is. So this is like our block, and I'm just going to add some lines. And I'm going to move this circle down here. And then when I'm done, I just check the green check mark. Okay, close block editor. Save the changes to planner. All those instances of the block have been changed. There's just one definition for planter in any one drawing. Let's say we need a long planter and a short planter. Any individual instance of a block can have different scaling factors in the X and Y direction. So if we want to make this twice as long, this is the X direction going this way, as you can see down here. Double the length we get, I'm just going to say, make the X factor be 2. So you notice if insertion point stayed in the right place, it expanded around that point. It also turned our circle into an ellipse as that stretched, which might or might not be appropriate to your use. If you wanted to keep doing this a lot, maybe you just make these guys a group instead, copy them from place to place, and then stretch one end, leaving the circle as a circle in its current location. So that's one of the drawbacks of blocks, is that when you scale them, everything in them scales the same amount. If we take this back up to make the Y also be 2, then we get something that's twice as big and back to being a circle again. So some blocks are made to be stretched. Others, and I picked the example of like a range that has a very fixed size. You don't want to be increasing that by an inch. It's not going to fit into the slot. A football field, that's a fixed size. Some, however, are made to be scaled. A case in point might be where we make a door, a little teeny tiny door that's 1 inch by 1 inch. And this is maybe a 32nd of an inch wide, something like that. Then we can place that. And if we want a 36-inch door, we just change the scaling factors to 36 and 36, and it's automatically the right size. So 1 block instead of 1 for each door size. We can also, worst comes to worst, explode a block. Let's say I want this one to be, I want to keep the height the same, the circle in the same place, still be a circle, but I would like to have this be much longer this way. I just basically want to stretch this end of it down a ways. But blocks can't be stretched. So for this, we need to explode that block back into its component pieces, which is this tool right here. You can type explode, or just pick it, hit enter, hit enter. You're out, and now this is individual stuff, and we can stretch this to be this thing that we want. It's no longer a block, it's no longer a planter, it's just some extra lines there. We could make that another block and call it planter 2, or long planter, or something along those lines. But for right now, exploding is the easiest way to go. Lastly, we've made this amazing planter here, and I would like to share that with another drawing. Actually, I want to send it to somebody on the internet, on email, so they can use it in their drawing. To do that, we write it out to my desktop as a separate little AutoCAD file, and it'll be called like planter.dwg, and I can insert that into any other drawing. Here's how that all works. So this is at the very end of page 4. That's the WBLOCK command for write block, WBLOCK. And since it's a block I've already made, I can say select the block. We'll pick that one called planter. And where do I want to put that? Well, I'm going to stick this on my desktop for right now. Planter.dwg. I could give it a new name here, but that's very confusing, so let's not. Scroll up. It will inherit the base point that we did right here in the center of it. So we can just say OK. And that creates a new file on our desktop. So if I go to open, if I go to get Jasmine's drawing here, and I want to insert my planter into her drawing, it's its own, such an important feature. It's right here after home, which is insert. This is all too small for me to see. AutoCAD's sort of keeping track of the previous ones I made, but I really would like to navigate to the desktop. I'll figure out how to do that here. But I'll pick planter, and then we can drag this planter into her living room. It appears it's a little large, so we'll scale it. Select it. Half as big, a third as big, a quarter as big. Let's say 0.333. Do them both the same. And then it's still centered around that same base point, and we can stick it up into her. We'll do it in front of the window. Yeah. Copy. One in front of both windows. So what's a little confusing with this is that you can insert a planter into a house plan. You can also insert a house plan into a planter. They're all just DWG files, and they can mix and match any way you want. I've never, I don't think, actually done it like insert a, well, you can insert a 747 into a garage. You just need to make the garage bigger, but the size of them has nothing to do with each other. And this is saved in this file. Even if I erase these and save it again and reopen it, the idea of that drawing of the planter is still in this file's internal library of blocks. So if I go to insert, and we say current drawing, and we see there's the planter, and I can bring it back in. If you get lots of blocks in a drawing that you don't want, you can erase them all and then purge them, and that gets them out of this file's own memory. Now, something you need to be careful with is, let's say I was busy drawing things, and I drew this sort of new kind of planter, and I decide to call this right here planter. Planter, select objects. We'll pick up base point. Okay. It says, we already have a planter block here. Do you really want to define every instance of where we have it with this new thing? Your old one is replaced. So let's say, yeah, redefine it. And they're all redefined. This is the new planter, and there can only be one planter in each drawing at each time. Back in whoever drawing that was I was just working in, that's still the old planter. This is the new one. Now, where that's very handy, let's say you're doing something like building elevation, and you had a bunch of, we knew we wanted this many windows, but we didn't know anything about them. So we make a block called window 1, and it's just a rectangle with this base point down here. and we draw it. And we say, okay, we got the spacing right, we got the numbers right, they're the right places in plan. And then the owner comes back and says, but that would really be better with an arched top. So we'd redefine the block with an arched top, and all these start getting arched tops just like that. And I want to, then I want to see mullions all the way down, and they all get mullions all the way down. You just keep updating that. That's actually probably better done with the block editor, so that the base point stays in the same place, and you're starting with dimensions that you're just tweaking them. But if you want to just completely redefine it, you can use the redefine block to do that. It used to be there wasn't a block editor. Exploding something, tweaking it, and making the block again was the only way to do it. But the block editor is really a preferable tool because you have to start with all the geometry you've already worked on. Let's just stop my talk now and start answering any questions you have about the blocks assignment, or we can go home and take a nap. So what are you going to draw? What are your blocks going to be? Okay, aerial view of a pumpkin would be fun. You want me to show you something fun? Revision cloud. You should have this on the Mac. Let's just say freehand. And what you might do is draw a circle and then just follow around the circle to get it like that, and then do whatever you want.